Hello, everyone. My name is Hayley McCorkle, and I am IFFGD's Public Relation Associate. Today, I just want to thank you for tuning in to IFFGD's Research Award Winner Series titled Where Are They Now? This program was designed not only to acknowledge this year as being IFFGD's 30th anniversary, but to also give us a chance to reconnect with some of our past Research Award winners. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Gupta, who is our 2019 IFFGD Research Award winner for Clinical Science Investigator. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, so can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe where you're currently located and maybe your current research focus?
Sure. I am actually an assistant professor at the University of California, Los Angeles, and I'm also the director of our Neuroimaging Core. And mainly our research is focused on brain-gut microbiome interactions related to obesity and altered ingestive behaviors. And I'll talk more about exactly what we do, but mainly the whole focus of our center actually is on brain gut microbiome related to GI disorders.
Yes, definitely a hot topic right now. But before we dive into that just a little bit more, can you tell us just how did winning the IFFGD award in 2019 impact your career?
Oh gosh, I mean, honestly, increased exposure to my research was amazing. Because when we talk about obesity, we talk about it as, an epidemic that is usually discussed in the context of public health or change your behaviors, exercise more, change the way you eat less, do protein, no carbs. It's all these diet kind of focus. But little attention actually is given to the relationship of obesity as a disorder within the GI system. And I really think that in my line of research, I investigate, as I said, the bidirectional interactions between the brain and the periphery, for example, the gut microbiome, but also how the environment impacts that bidirectional interaction within the body. So, really, the award helped highlight how obesity is related to the GI, but also anytime when you talk about the brain, you're again, further removing this line of research or focus from the gut. But really, it's all connected, it's all interconnected. And the reality is that our bodies are connected, the different systems within our body are connected, but we don't live in a bubble, we don't live in isolation. So the environment impacts our body. So the exposure actually from this award really brought awareness to obesity as a GI disorder, but also brought awareness to the fact that obesity is complex, it's heterogeneous, and it involves multiple pathways and systems, I think.
Yeah, I honestly didn't really understand the whole impact of the environment until I started reading some of the information that was provided to us after you had won the research award in 2019. So it was so exciting just to kind of learn some new
Yeah,
stuff about it. And like you said, just raising awareness about these things and increasing the knowledge for the general public is so
yeah,
important.
it
So
is.
yeah, and as we kind of go into detail here, just can you briefly explain to us about some of the current research studies that you might be working on today?
Yes, so basically my research has five main themes. One is, of course, understanding this mechanism underlying like altered eating behaviors, whether it's food addiction, whether it's increased cravings and obesity in humans. So I alluded to this earlier where I was talking about the brain gut microbiome pathways, and it's related to, kind of understanding the signals between the gut microbiome and the brain, whether it's this crosstalk from this top-down signals or this bottom-up signaling from the gut. So that's one area of research that I do. The second theme that I look at is I look at biological mechanisms as impacted by psychosocial, cultural, environmental factors. So when I say that, I think about like these psychosocial, cultural, and environmental factors. How do they get under the skin and get embedded in your biology? So that really is a really huge focus of my research, and actually was helped kind of the preliminary data helped get an R01 related to this research. So this is really important, especially in today's world, where, for example, if you're looking at stress like COVID, or you're looking at the racial tension, all these are psychosocial, culture, environmental factors. And we know that stressors, they're not distributed equally in the population. They're probably more prevalent again, against disadvantaged communities. And so my lab's efforts are to, understand how can we mitigate these stress-related influences. And I think one way to do that is, because you can sometimes can't change like where somebody's raised or what they're exposed to. You can't change the color of their skin, but maybe if we understand the underlying biology, maybe we can understand like how do we intervene. So this is basically the framework of my second area of research. And actually, it was the premise of this recent R01 that we received. And then the third goal of my research is to look at subgroups, because one size does not fit all. So a huge focus of my lab is to look at race differences, look at sex differences. Again, the R1 that we received is looking at ethnic minorities, looking at discrimination, social isolation, related to brain-gut microbiome interactions in obesity. We look at male, females, because we know that the brain and the gut microbiome is different in males and females. And I think this is really important because it has implications for effective and individualized treatment targets. Also, the fourth line of research I do is I look at obesity across critical periods across the lifespan. So when we think about obesity, most people think that, okay, it's not, you don't, become obese overnight. It happens over time. And sometimes there are critical periods in the developmental phase that could be important to study. So whether there are risk factors associated with those key developmental phases, or whether they could be, studied further as prognostic markers, that's really important. So that's the fourth area of research. And then the fifth area of research that I look at is looking at treatments. So I think that when we talk about making changes in biology and behavior, we need to look at targeted treatments. So some of the things that I do in my lab is whether we're looking at brain-focused treatments, so things like cognitive behavioral therapy, or whether we're looking at gut-based treatments such as diets, time-restricted eating, or maybe like a diet rich, like a Mediterranean diet rich in polyphenols or things like that. And then we try to see how does it change the brain and the gut microbiome after these targeted treatments. So that's the fifth line of research. So we started, just kind of trying to phenotype, and then we've been kind of moving along across the lifespan, different groups. And then now we're kind of moving into the targeted treatments. So that's where we
Yes.
are. Yeah.
And it's like once you understand some of the things that could play a role, now you're trying to figure out how can we really help the patient population here. And I know you briefly touched a little bit on what you hope to understand from some of these areas of your framework for your research, but what are some of the key points that you really, really hope to understand in order to help those adults and children who are living with GI conditions related to obesity?
So I think if we take the systems biology approach, and what I mean by systems biology is like looking at multiple systems in the body. So how is the GI connected to the brain? How is it connected to inflammation? And then also looking at, the environmental factors, cultural factors. If we kind of take this integrated, complex, heterogeneous approach, systems biology, what I call systems biology approach, you're accounting for different variables. How this will help us understand what contributes to the heterogeneity associated with obesity. And I think that this line of research is not only timely, but it's impactful considering the whole current health and social culture of our world. I also think that overall this will help support the development of more effective, targeted, maybe more precise or personalized interventions. And I think, this approach will help, identify specific, whether it's metabolites or molecules for the development of like anti-obesity drugs. But
Mhm.
really, I think looking at one system or one area of focus and neglecting everything else is kind of dangerous. And we really need to take this holistic kind of systems approach.
I
And
love that.
that's,
That
yeah, and I think that's the only way to get a targeted treatments or more precise, personalized treatments.
Yes, because it's just like what you said before, it's not one size fit all. And I think that's what a lot of the research is showing us, that we have to figure out how can we tailor things to each individual and their
Yeah.
specific needs. And so when you're talking about this, like you said, all research is impactful, but there's some studies that may stick out to some of us that may have seemed more successful than others. So do you have any research studies that you may have been involved in that you see as being your most successful one and why?
Yeah, so just to before I talk about like, my biggest successes, a little bit of background. I was actually raised in South Africa, in Southern Africa. So I was exposed to a lot of like cultural stressors and adverse environmental factors. And I think I came from a background where health disparities is like a huge glaring issue. And so that's just what actually is the passion that kind of led me to do this kind of work. He's basically seeing how these factors lead to biological changes and then health disparities. So, like I said, it spearheaded my current research passion and efforts, but it's been very, very fruitful and very exciting because we have actually received two provisional patents that are currently under consideration. One is actually looking at how we see sex differences in the brain-gut microbiome interactions related to food addiction in females, especially. And the other one, which is actually one of my favorite studies, is where we're looking at how early life adversity, so it could be any kind of trauma or stress, and how that impacts the brain gut microbiome interactions in obesity. So that's the second provisional patent that we have. But it also led to, a couple of actually recent grants. I've mentioned the R1, where we got from NIMHD, where we're looking at racial discrimination and social isolation. So very important, especially like, I mean, I hate to say this, but now's the time where we're in that right, phase where we can actually collect the data and understand that and actually show how these environmental exposures and culture exposures. So we're very fortunate that we got that R1. We also, you know, I mean, I think those are the three main ones that I'm really most excited about. And yeah, we're excited to see where this goes next.
Yeah. And I mean, like you said, it's an unfortunate situation that we have been placed in here with, with COVID and some of the things that have been happening as far as race and things like that. But it does put a lot of researchers like yourself in an area where we can really investigate how does this affect the patient population, in what ways, and to really delve into understanding these things a little bit deeper. So it is an exciting time, and it's just I'm so excited to hear about your research to come, especially with all of the grants that you have received, because it's not easy to
Thank
get.
you.
It's awesome. And we're talking about how you won the research award in 2019 with IFFGD for Clinical Science Investigator. But what other acknowledgments might have you received either before or after winning the IFFGD award?
Um, so since the IFG award, I did get an AGA Rome Foundation award, and that one is actually funding our CBT study in obesity, when we talked about the top-down, like brain targeted intervention. So they're doing that one. We did get a Biocodex microbiome grant where we're looking at the bottom up, so targeting the diet intervention with obesity. And then we also got a Danone grant from the yogurt Danone company. That's also very microbiome focused. And then the recent R1. So it's been very exciting. Like our preliminary data has really helped fuel all these other grants and the current research. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's like I said, the grant money, that's kind of what kickstarts a lot of, not even kind of, that is what kickstarts the
It
research.
does.
And
It
without the
does.
grant money, it's hard. It's hard to really do the deep research that you guys are trying to do in order to help the patient population.
But I do think that IFFG, that award, really helped showcase my work because to be honest with you, like I've mentioned, earlier when we started, when we think about GI, you think about IBS, IBD. You think about the traditional GI disorders. Usually people don't think of obesity as a GI disorder. So it really helped showcase that, hey, we're targeting something that you traditionally don't think of as a GI disorder. So it brought a lot of awareness to my work, but it also, I think, will help a lot of patients because unfortunately, obesity is such a pandemic. It's such a involved process. So I think IFFG was instrumental in helping highlight my work, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
Well, it's all about raising awareness and how can we increase public knowledge without, raising awareness about some of those things that aren't really in the public eye, like obesity as far as its relation to GI conditions. So we are definitely excited about the research that is to come from your lab. So, and you talk so much just about your research, and it just shows that you're so passionate about it. And you even gave a little backstory about why you even got started. But what exactly do you enjoy the most about being a researcher and why?
Oh, it's very exciting. I mean, you can probably hear it in my voice. I love being a researcher. I love letting the data speak to you. Sometimes, your data doesn't make sense, and it's just a matter of being sensitive to what unfolds. You try this way, you try that way. You have to sometimes step back. It's sometimes very frustrating, but it's very exciting. I think the most probably important is the idea of trying to get down to an answer that can
Mhm.
not only explain the why, but the how. So, as soon as we start understanding that, as soon as we start understanding the why and the how, I think we might be able to come up with better solutions. Like I said, sometimes we don't have control over our circumstances. You might come from a low SES. You might come from, a Hispanic or a Black community, which we know have higher prevalence rates of obesity. You might be female, which we know have more food addiction or more cravings compared to males. So we don't have control over that, but maybe what drives me is that if we can answer some of these questions, we can maybe empower people with solutions. I think that's the bottom line.
Yes, yes. And everyone is looking for a solution to their problem. I mean, everyone's Googling. We're trying to figure out, we're asking our doctors those questions to figure out the solution to any of the problems that are creating a debilitating quality of life. And I think that like what you're saying here of the figuring out the how and the why, I think that's so cool just to hear that that is what drives you in your motivation to continue to do research.
It does.
Yeah, so with some of this that you're talking about, I can only imagine that there's probably a lot of gap needs in the area of research. So, what do you see as being some of the gap needs in research, and how do you foresee some of those needs being fulfilled from your lab?
I think we need more collaborations because you can't be an expert in everything. You can't know everything. So I think the best work comes from us being collaborative. The field is very exciting. We're now looking at big data, interdisciplinary teams. I think that's what's going to allow us to expand our narrow focus on the GI tract to include other systems, other influences to answer these very important questions. I'm also eager to focus on disparities and environmental factors. I think that sometimes, um, as a science or as medicine, we focus very much on the body and the biology, and I think we need to account for that, of the relationship of the biology with our surroundings. Basically, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and lucky for us at UCLA, we have tremendous support from our GI chief, Dr. Israelian. We have lots of opportunities to get this work done. So our center actually focuses mainly on brain-gut microbiome axis and how it relates to disorders of the GI system. I think this field of systems biology, as it grows, we'll see more funding opportunities come up. I know that NIH right now has put out a lot of calls out there for health disparities research and systems biology research. And I think these are truly exciting times. I mean, like questions like this will have real world applications for those who are obese, but we kind of need to come together and work together in collaborative and interdisciplinary teams and just kind of be open-minded about what we study, I think.
Yes, yes. And it's just what you said, is collaboration is the only way for us to all come together and come up with the best solution possible. I mean, one answer is not always the best one. If you can bring everyone's ideas and answers together to the table, I mean, the best solution for all patients will ultimately come from that. So, I mean, this whole conversation that we've had today has been super exciting. And, just learning about some of the research studies that you are involved in and what's to come. And then, like you said, with NIH putting out more funding for the areas that you're focused in, I mean, that just adds more excitement to what's to come in the future for a lot of patients and anyone who suffers from obesity or any GI disorder. So,
Yeah.
we just thank you so much for sharing your insight in this topic. And we want to thank everyone else who has tuned in to our Research Award winner series, where today we've had the pleasure of catching up with Dr. Gupta and just learning about her journey through research. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.